All right, so we're on to the final drawing. So now I want to refine that arm and sword. And so I use the same process of drawing onto a new layer and refining it, just, specifically on the arm and sword. So I'll select the arm and sword, put it on a new layer, turn it blue, drop the opacity, and redraw the whole thing again. Well, some people may be able to get a drawing just right the first time out, and sometimes I do too. But don't be afraid to keep redrawing and refining. If you're making this up as you go, and if you're being creative, it's hard to know exactly what you're drawing, especially the details. Because by definition, you're creating something new. So, you can start kind of vague and general, and then as you draw it, and as you redraw, you can go into more detail. And you can change the forms. You notice that I'm giving the sword this sort of like T shape, and it's to mimic the sort of wedge shape that's also in the armor. And that's a part of a rhythm in drawing. It's a repetition of themes or motifs or shapes. And it's good to do because it unifies your drawing, and it also, like I said, it gives it rhythm, which is, repetition and variation. Just like a rhythm in a song. You have a steady beat, or you have certain things that repeat. And then, sometimes there's a variation on that repetition to give it interest. So drawing is a back and forth process for me. It's an interaction because, I don't know, if you think about it, like who's actually drawing? This is all recorded in real time and drawn in real time. And sometimes I draw faster than I could consciously think about what I'm drawing. So it's largely, your instinct that's drawing. And where does your instinct come from? Where does the subconscious come from? Um, Especially when it's expressed in your drawings, you know? That's a whole nother topic, maybe another class. I think a lot of it has to do with habit. What are you used to drawing? What do you draw a lot? What do you look at? What do you have reference for? What are you interested in? It'll all come out in your drawing when you're drawing freely. When you have, a specific client or a specific project that someone else wants you to draw, well, that's kind of different. That's their idea, and you're working with their idea, and you're going to express yourself to a certain extent, but you're really working with their idea. This class is more about you drawing the sort of characters that you want to draw. And so it's an expression of your drawing habits, your personality, your instincts as an artist, as a character designer. Maybe you're into sports, or maybe you're more into science fiction, or you draw um, pop stars, or you draw fashion models. You know, draw whatever you want, draw whatever you're interested in, and think about it afterwards, and also, I guess, when you're drawing it. If you're not satisfied with what you're drawing, then make a conscious effort to look at different things, to copy different things, to study different things. And then when it comes time to draw, it'll come out in your drawing. It's kind of like sports. practice is really important, and it comes out in game time. So this is sort of like game time right now. This is you performing when you're drawing this character here, or when I'm drawing this character. But all the real work has been done, behind the scenes. It's the practicing, the copying, the looking at, the studying, doing anatomy studies, doing costume studies, studying other artists. And this is just my technique also, and just my philosophy. You can definitely have your own philosophy, you probably do. And every artist has their own approach and their own philosophy about drawing. Some people are more deliberate about their drawing. They maybe know exactly what they're going to draw before they draw. They visualize it in their head. For me though, it's a I I need to like start putting lines on paper. I need to start drawing. I need to, work from my subconscious and then react to that and then shape that. And sometimes you may not like what you see in your subconscious, and that's something to think about. Maybe you need to make changes in your life, in your subconscious and the things you think about. And sometimes you may be really surprised with yourself, and really happy with what you do and what you see when you draw. It's almost like a different person within yourself. Drawing is a lot about learning about yourself and getting in touch with who you are. Turning off that rational part of your brain and just drawing and seeing what happens. So something technical I want to note here is that I'm working in monochrome mode in Clip Studio, and what that is it's equivalent to bitmap mode in Photoshop. And what that means is there's no anti-aliasing. There's no shades of gray used to render the lines digitally. So this is really useful further down the line because you get cleaner selections and fills, and generally the file sizes are smaller. So now I've put in the figure for the most part. I refined the figure. This is it's got all the details I want. You can go in and keep touching things up. For the most part, this is going to be the final piece. And after I put in that final drawing, I usually like to go in with a heavier line to give it a little more substance. And while you're doing this heavier line, you also want to create closed spaces by closing any gaps in the drawing. Because in the future, I'm going to be using the paint bucket and the magic wand tool to fill areas and make selections. So to make that easier, you don't want to have any broken shapes. And when I was drawing in the refining stage, I tend to use a really choppy line, and that leaves a lot of empty spaces that I need to make sure I go fill in on this area. So it's got like a dual purpose, this part of the process. It's to give the drawing a little more definition and weight, but it's also to fill in shapes so I can make selections easier in the next stages. Yeah, on the subject of broken lines, some people can do like really long, perfect lines, And you can turn your page around so it goes with the angle of your stroke, so you can get these nice perfect lines. For me personally, I don't really like that too much. I'm not really too bothered by it. I kind of like the sketchiness. I like the choppiness of it. It gives it a little sort of grit and character I really like. But it's up to you. Whatever style you like, do whatever you works for you, and do whatever you think looks good to you. And then again, also try different styles and see how they feel. That's an interesting idea, why exactly does drawing in a certain way make you feel a certain way? Why do you like what you like, and why do you not like what you like? It's a French sociologist, Pierre Bourdieu, and he has a lot of interesting theories about it being related to sort of issues of taste and class, and also your sort of political leanings in the sphere of art, but also your socioeconomic status in the larger world. It's an interesting theory. Here I'm going through and cleaning up some of these stray lines. Refining, detailing. This process is really boring to me, actually, and really time consuming. At some point, I'd like to be able to skip this whole process. It's like this refining part of it. For me, the most fun is the first part, and maybe a little bit of the second part. Once I have the full drawing in, it's I don't know, it's not so much fun anymore. It's a little less creative. Or it's creative in more of a strictly technical sense when you're not, you're creating details in the drawing. You're not creating form and ideas as much. You're not creating the big forms. I mean, what you're doing with drawing essentially is creating form. You're rendering form that wasn't there before through your line work. But generally, this part is not very fun for me. So maybe in the future, I don't know. Hopefully, I can find a way to just skip this part, or just skip it altogether. I don't know. But this is where I'm at right now. This is a very sort of a commercial way to make art. You end up with a finished piece right here because you have these readable lines, and that's a large part of why you add these heavier lines, is so you can read a little better, so the forms are a little more distinct on the final drawing. It also makes the figure and the silhouette stand out a little more. And you're not only just creating a heavier outline, you're also indicating shadow to a certain extent in certain areas. We'll do that a little more in a different step. And this is just, one process. This is not necessarily a process I use all the time. And I may change it in the future, but it's a it's a fairly straightforward process. And you'll end up with you know, a finished project. This part of the process also slows down a lot for me too. Like, this video is twice as long as the first initial drawing, and I'm drawing, a lot slower. if you go back and watch the first video, it seems like I'm drawing pretty fast, and actually I am, and it's all in real time. All these videos are in real time. But it's just the nature of the process, I guess. So refining the sword a little more. If you want to get it nice and clean, you can start using vectors, use rulers, some guidelines. For now, I'm just, roughing in the shape. It's going to be okay for this for now. Going in, erasing. Yeah, like I said, this part's kind of boring. I don't know, I don't like it. I wish I could fast forward this in real life. But some people may really like this part. I think this is where you get a really nice finished product. You can put a lot of polish into artwork at this stage. For me personally, I like the initial creation part, the rough sketching. And like I said, drawing is a good way to find out about what you are, what you're into. But just like life in general, you don't have to get stuck into that if you don't want.